Welcome, everyone, to the September 18th meeting of the Tompkins County Expanded Committee. And got a couple of preliminaries I want to mention. Is that we will probably have an executive session at the end of this meeting, and I will announce the reason for it when it gets that far. This is the third of our EBC meetings, and actually have the fewest presentations, so we'll see how it goes tonight, but we'll make up for it tomorrow night. That we haven't had a meeting for 8 days. Any meetings that occurred in between are blamed on Dan Klein, not on me. Tonight we have, I'm going to ask Lisa, is there anything you want to do preliminarily?
No, thank you, Mike.
All right, let's just get into it then. Tonight, the first presenters will be the Emergency Response Department, and they are on Section 4, page 97 of the budget books. And we've got Mike Stitley and Jessica Veras and John Hadlachek here with us, and we welcome them. So whenever you're ready, go right ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I think for the most part, everybody knows one another, but I just wanted to point out that Jessica is our Deputy Director of the department, and John Hadlachek is our Assistant Director of the 911 Center. Jessica will be our primary presenter this afternoon. However, there may be questions that I'll answer, or maybe John will answer if it's specific to the 911 Center. So I think we're ready to get started. So I just want to acknowledge that we recognize that this is going to be a very difficult budget year. We are aware of that, and we just appreciate the opportunity to meet with the legislature this evening. Yes.
Thank you. So first, I'd like to say that we thank you for all of your support in the past. As of October 28th, our 911 center staff will be back to full staff, which is amazing. It's done wonders for morale to have additional staffing to be able to handle the increase in call volume. So thank you very much for all your support for that. And also that it's important to note for this budget cycle that without the 5% reduction, we were able to hit our target budget with no OTRs whatsoever and be completely sustained in our programs. So I just wanted to make note of the fact that without that 5% reduction, we would have been A-okay. With that, the 5% reduction would result in an elimination of staff positions. Not on the 911 center side, because we are now back to full staff. This would hit on our administrative side. We've chosen not to disclose that position because of, for obvious reasons, we wanted to be able to figure out how we were going to make this work if, in fact, there was a reduction in staff. Obviously, with that, it would ultimately result in a reduced capacity to provide service to the public, both with our public safety partners, our county employees, and the general public at large. There we go.
And so with that, we really have two OTRs. The first one is for a countywide security manager and for security staff. So I know that most of you are already aware of this initiative, and I know that this has been discussed quite a bit. But this OTR would be for security manager and for security officers, and this is coming out of a recommendation from the Countywide Safety and Security Committee. So if anybody has any direct questions about that program, I'm certainly willing to answer to the best of my ability. But in essence, this would be a new initiative. So even though it's landing in our department, this is really a combination of work from several different departments that sit on that committee that's made this recommendation. So I don't know if you want us to keep going or just pause for this.
Why don't you go ahead, or unless you want questions to interrupt.
Okay, then we'll keep going, and then we can, all right, I guess, do questions at the end.
So obviously with a new security, if that OTR were to pass in a new security division, would result in more administrative work, more financial work. The reduction would also eliminate our ask or in our original budget for a fiscal coordinator. Our administrative coordinator will be retiring next year. With that, we were able to budget for a fiscal coordinator, which would take over all the budgeting responsibilities from our admin coordinator. The reason for that was because of the increase in grants, the addition of a new division, the addition of the EMS division. There's just a lot more financial responsibility. So many other departments have some rendition of a fiscal coordinator, so it wasn't unprecedented, and we were able to budget for it. This 5% reduction would eliminate that position, as well as an additional staff position. We would not anticipate hiring any fiscal coordinator until mid to late summer, probably August timeframe, to have some kind of overlap with the administrative coordinator for turnover. And then, as you can see, there's the OTR for the security manager and security staff.
And then the second one, which would include a fiscal coordinator, one staff position that potentially it would have to be cut.
And
cut.
right, and the administrative coordinator and the staff position ultimately amounted to the $202,000 plus. The county administrator recommended a partial restoration of that to include the staff position that would be eliminated and not the fiscal coordinator position. And that's it. And if there's any questions.
Well, that was very succinct. Thank you. Let's open it up. Questions? Lee?
Just a question on the EMS program and what you're projecting in the years ahead on that. You've got some grant money to support that through 2025?
Yes. Yeah. As of right now, we feel that we'll be to completely support the EMS program between the grant money that we have for next year and hopefully some leftover grant money from this year, but also some money that we've budgeted within our operation budget.
Randy?
Hey, I'm just looking at your budget for this year, and I'm seeing that based on your 2024 budget of $2.6 million, year-to-date on your salary and wages, you're only $1.5 million. I'm sorry, only $1.5 million. But I see your premium pay is quite a bit more in your budget. Is it because you're short-staffed? Is that the reason for that, or?
No, it's kind of it's a situation with the financial software. The premium pay includes all of that overtime and everything and regular pay on top of the premium pay. So if they get premium pay within that shift, it's automatically being deducted from the premium pay line item as opposed to the regular pay line. It's an issue with the financial software, is my understanding.
Okay.
It's not because we're understaffed or anything. It's just because of the way the financial software
This doesn't
reports
paint an accurate picture of what's actually happening.
I follow you. Okay. And then also the last, I'm not sure if you're looking at the same page as I am, but it talks about your actual grants that you're receiving. And let me get to that page. And looking for it. Here it is. So it says emergency response grant. So this is all related to the emergency response EMS system, all the grants. But anyways, it says that your budget for this year was $405,000, but your 2025 budget is $663,000. It shows actually a cut, maybe because there's some type of matching amount for that. But I'm sure it shows for all these emergency response grants, it shows your expense, and maybe this is a system issue as well, and your revenue is matching. So I'm curious what.
Yes, so you're looking at, it's 3417? Is that the functional unit that you're looking at?
3417, yep.
Yes. So that was done on purpose to match, because we're receiving grants, and because of that, all the grant money is earmarked for specific things. So it ends up being a zero-based budget. So the expenses will match the revenues. They have to in order for the state to reimburse it the way that they do. So, but that is a combination of all of our grants, not just EMS. That includes, I think, the EMS grants, all the Homeland Security grants, the state interoperability grants. It includes all of those grants. So
That's a new account that we set up this year just because it was difficult, because the grant money was, prior to that particular account being set up, was being distributed into our other accounts. It was very confusing because it was being dumped into our operating budget. So we worked with finance and budgeting, and they set up that account specifically so that we could just track the grant money, because it was hard to do it the other way.
But you're slated to get more grant money in 2025 than you did in 2024, or it's just a timing issue?
it's a timing thing, but that included some rollover from 2024, anticipated rollover from 2024 for grant funds, because a lot of those grants are multi-year.
Right.
So we anticipated whatever wasn't spent for 2024 to be moved back into 2025. So there is some of that, and there is some additional grant funds that were coming in that we don't typically get. The EMS grant from Senator Webb and a couple of others that were in there. That's the result of the increase.
Thank you.
Shauna Black, then Ann Corman, then Amanda Champion.
Thank you, Mike. I was wondering, it looks like Anna Kellis's legislation for the EMS bill was passed earlier today, and was wondering if the county would now be able to start billing for those services.
Thank you for the question, Shauna. So currently, because we have an agency number and not a certificate of need, we're not capable of billing. This is new information to us, so it's certainly something we can look at. But as it stands right now, just because of the way we're structured and how we've been established, we're not able to bill because of this new legislation. But I think there's potential opportunity for us to evaluate that moving forward.
Thank you.
Ann?
Thank you. Just trying to figure out, not necessarily your presentation, but just trying to figure out some of our paperwork here and our charts. But thank you for the presentation, Jessica, Michael, and John. So it looks like, from what I can tell, so I'm trying to see if I have this correct, for the 5% reinstatement that you asked for, that was $202,000, but the county administrator recommended reinstating $100,000 of that, and so you would still be down a position?
No, because the fiscal coordinator position is an additional position we currently have. We budgeted for that additional position as a replacement for the administrative coordinator. So with the county administrator's recommended $100,000, that would eliminate the need for us to eliminate a staff position, our current staff.
But you won't
position.
be able to hire the fiscal person.
You would not be able to hire
But
the
you
fiscal
still
coordinator.
lost the position that you're not going to refill, right, for the administration?
No, we
No?
would gain our staff position back with her recommendation. We would lose the fiscal coordinator position.
So you won't be able to fill that, and then the countywide security manager is not recommended, right? As part of the budget.
That's my understanding.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
And I just want to point out the optics of having to eliminate a position, and then if the security management OTR was to be approved, hiring 5 positions, and the optics of that is kind of a little wonky, but. Yeah.
Thank you.
Amanda?
Annie asked what I was questioning, and I think I get it now, I think.
Our recommendation is to include the staff member position that we were looking to eliminate and not hire a fiscal coordinator.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Veronica?
I apologize if I spaced while you were answering Annie and said this, but with the OTR about the 5% cut reinstatement, which would, I don't want to say this wrong, it would reinstate the position you haven't specified that would be cut if no OTRs were funded. But that's it. You wouldn't be hiring a fiscal coordinator, but you would be continuing the administrative coordinator position. Maybe here's what I don't understand. If you got all your requests filled, and we could say yes to all the OTRs, would you hire a fiscal coordinator this coming year and also hire a new administrative coordinator to replace the person who's retiring?
Well, no, because what we envision is, somebody that could just focus on the finances, and that would be the administrative coordinator, and then, the fiscal coordinator, and rather than have an administrative coordinator, we would look to hire somebody at a lower grade for an administrative assistant that can handle all the office work in the front end of the building. Right now, our administrative coordinator is doing both. There's a lot of mission creep between the two roles, and it gets quite confusing at times, so that's what we're envisioning.
That makes sense. The answer might be no, but is there any room for squeezing the way as this is in the budget to not take up quite as much money? Maybe that's silly, because what I see here is a request to budget for an administrative coordinator 35 hours per week all year, and also a fiscal coordinator all year, but it sounds like that's not what's going to happen. These two positions in the requested scenario will be filled at the same time for a short amount of time, but not most of the time.
That's correct.
Is there a way to account for that in the budget? I guess I'm just grubbing for dollars where we can find them. Maybe that's an answer for another time, or I don't know.
Are you directing that to anybody in particular?
I guess I'm kind of looking at Lisa and Norma and Corey, the people who know the rules of how you put staff positions in the budget, even when there's something slightly unusual about the extent to which they're filled.
I'm not entirely sure that I followed your question, but
I had if I can,
Yes.
I think I know what you're getting at.
Go for it.
So let me see if it is. So with a position, where somebody's leaving a position, maintaining that position gives them that position, but you really wanted a different position started, a new position. So are you asking that, why can't we use that money to keep that one position to switch it to the new person that they want?
I think the way I understood your question, Veronica, is that since we're not going to be looking to hire the fiscal coordinator January 1, and we wouldn't be looking to hire them until mid to late summer, how do we capture that in the budget? And I think that's a good question, and that's what I think I understood your question to be.
Yeah, is there a way to capture that in the budget so that the amount of dollars we're budgeting is closer to the amount that you'd like to spend, as opposed to the amount it takes to have both roles filled for 12 months each, which is not going to get spent?
So budgeting more like a 0.5 FTE versus a full FTE situation.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Why don't we, we talked about that internally, so why don't you just explain what your perspective is on that as far as asking it later on for more?
Oh, I budgeted it for the full year because I didn't want to have to anticipate going back to the legislature to fulfill the other half of the FTE in the future. Because obviously I think it would be difficult to find somebody to actually work only part-time doing this doing that position. So I think we'd be hard pressed to find somebody with that skill set to do it for only part-time work. So that was why I budgeted for the whole year, knowing that I would have to go back and ask for additional FTE funding, if that makes sense.
I think so. Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead,
I
Ann.
had one follow-up question. So in one of the OTRs, it said, additionally, there is a second position that Doer is requesting to reinstate. The position has not yet been identified due to the sensitivity and uncertainty of the situation.
That's the staff position that Lisa is recommending that we reinstate.
Okay, so then it is stated, but it wasn't stated here. Okay, right? Well, so that position, we don't have to worry about in a way because in Lisa's budget, you're recommending that money be there for that position.
That's my understanding, yes.
But we haven't talked about that exact position. And we don't need to because the money's there, so you don't, right? You're not getting rid of another position.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding because I still thought we had to put in for the OTR. So maybe I'm.
Well, our OTR that we put in was for two positions, the staff position and the fiscal coordinator. Lisa's recommendation is for a partial restoration of that for the staff position and not the fiscal coordinator. So yes, the answer to your question, Annie, is yes. She is recommending the staff position be reinstated, and so yes, you wouldn't have to worry about that. It's there in her recommended budget.
We still had to do the OTR, though.
So I'm just wondering about this line in here where it says the position has not yet been identified. We're not talking about another position.
Correct.
A different one.
Yeah, we were just trying to emphasize that, leadership has identified the position. We just didn't want to talk about it in open forum because if it is restored, then it wouldn't matter. We don't want anybody to fear losing their job.
Okay, thank you.
In budgeting, we always try to talk about positions and not talk about individuals.
Right.
Anyone else? Randy?
Yeah, it's tough to talk about positions, right? I'm looking at your department, and you've gone from 30 and a half employees in 2022, and you're requesting to go to 35. Is that correct?
Yes, and some of that was also the EMS staff that we brought on last year.
Yeah, I understand all those changes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But you mentioned, I realize it's complicated, more complicated than just a number. But you mentioned your call volume is up quite a bit. How much is it up?
911 center. I would ask, are you referring to the 911 center?
Yeah.
Yep.
So the couple of days ago, we were looking at numbers from 2 years ago, and pure calls received on 911 lines was at 30,000. As of 2023's numbers, they increased to 35,000. This year, we're probably looking to go to about 37,500, and that's just direct calls on 911 lines. Overall, total call volume, we are probably going to make a very good run at 150,000 total calls across all our disciplines, emergency, non-emergency. That is up from, when did we do the retained study on 2 years ago? So that is up over 10,000 calls in 2 years. So the numbers continue to trend upward. I don't see any indicator that they're going to drop off. The only discipline that I would say remains relatively flat in call volume are calls for fire service. And that's a product of technology more than anything else, and less substantial fire calls that occur in any jurisdiction. It's not just us, that's a nationwide trend.
Thank you.
How's things going with the backup 911 center up at?
Yeah, I'm excited to
East Hill.
report. Yeah, it's going very, very well. We moved in a week ago Monday. We received a certificate of occupancy a bit unexpectedly the Thursday before, and we had to make the decision to move the staff over there right away, in part because we've had an open PO with the furniture vendor for well over 18 months. That's because of the renovations we're doing on Brown Road. So in order to hit an agreement that we have with them, we had to move our staff over there, so all of our staff are operating over there. It's going very well. Renovations are started on Brown Road, and we're expecting the furniture to be delivered December the 9th, and we're hoping to have the team back by mid to end January on Brown Road.
You've actually moved the whole operation over there temporarily.
Yes, that's right.
Pretty neat.
Yeah. And we're really excited about sharing it with the legislature. What we're envisioning is once the primary center has been completely renovated, before we bring our team back, to invite the entire legislature to come up, see Brown Road before we bring our staff back. And then once we bring our staff back, have an open house at the backup center and have the legislature come and visit. We just ran out of time in order to meet our obligation with the vendor that had to have a commitment from us to have the furniture delivered by December the 9th.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Anything else, folks? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lisa.
There's just, in addition to all of the trends that were mentioned for the Department of Emergency Response, I just wanted to talk about one more through line or piece of information for as moving forward. I know that the department, there have been a substantial increase in contracting costs over the last year, and Mike has done a great job of trying to negotiate for to keep those costs contained. But this is one department that relies a lot on those contracted services and increases in fees. In the 2024 budget, we budgeted, the legislature approved half the funding for ongoing funding for the EMS program, which we haven't needed in 2024 and we won't need in 2025 because of the state funds that we received to support this program. But as Jessica mentioned in her opening remarks, without the 5% cut, they were able to cover all of the costs in their budget with that target. That includes those costs of those escalating service contracts. So that's just something to be aware of, that in 2020, for the 2026 budget, when we don't have those ongoing grant funds to support the EMS program, those grant funds, the funds that were originally budgeted, a lot has been eaten into with the increasing costs of those service contracts. So one way or another, they're going to need to be paid for.
And those service contracts currently for both 2024 and 2025 also do not include the backup center, and those will have to be included in future years. So they're going to continue to go up.
Sure, and just to add some context, there are 3 contracts that cost quite a bit. The first one is the Motorola radio system. Jess and I met with that team back in January, and they provided us a quote just for the radio system of about $978,000 for that contract. And as of today, I'm waiting for a new number. We've already negotiated about $100,000 down on that. And we're pushing them for even a lower amount, but historically we have a 5-year contract with them. The second contract that we have is for a system called Spillman, which is our CAD RMS system, and that is the computer system that we use to dispatch all of our calls, and the computer system that all of our public safety partners use with their computers inside their vehicles. We're expecting, well, they initially presented us with a 7% increase. We're still negotiating with them. We've told them that that's not acceptable, but by the end of that 5-year contract, we're going to be close to $240,000 a year for that service. And then the last one is our Vesta phone system, which was originally rolled into the backup center project, meaning that we had switched vendors when they initially agreed on doing the backup center. And so the cost for that annual service contract was rolled into that contract for the first 5 years, and that's about $300,000 a year. So we're expecting that next year it's going to be quite it's going to be interesting, quite frankly, because as Jessica mentioned, we've in essence built another 911 center. And so if you think about the cost that I've just mentioned, and that being for our Brown Road location, it's going to be it's probably not going to be double that, but certainly going to be much higher.
Thank you. Anyone else? Rich?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand. You've asked for restoration of 2 positions, and Lisa, you've approved essentially the funding for 1?
Yeah, I was able to restore half the funding back.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Thanks to all 3 of you.
Thank you.
And we appreciate
Thank you very much.
information that you've helped us with.
Thank you.
Our next presenters have to do with the Sheriff's Office and Jail. We have Derek Osborne, our Tompkins County Sheriff, and Jen Olin, our Tompkins County Undersheriff. And on Zoom is Megan Cook.
We thought our presentation was here already, so we had Megan hop on quick, and she's going to bring it up on. So hopefully we can get through this without a hitch.
When you're ready, it's all right.
I can just start, if I could just speak for just a couple minutes.
Good.
I know this is a really, really tough budget year. I don't pretend to know all the intricacies behind it. I don't involve myself in that stuff too much, but I got to say at the Sheriff's Office, right now operationally, we're in a fantastic position. And I'd really hate to see that harmed in any way if we can come up with a way to prevent that. I think we're running things better than ever. When you look around, we're the only agency that's maintained our law enforcement staffing. And we've done that without having to bring in big sign-on bonuses to keep that going. We're in a really great shape. Nobody can say that, especially locally. And I know we're the only jail in New York State that's fully staffed. Everybody else is suffering, and we seem to be excelling. Our work has increased with the city staffing issues that have been going on for several years now. We stepped up, and we've been there when needed. Going all the way back to our COVID days, the Sheriff's Office is the one that stepped up and handled every complaint, working with the Health Department, even in the city of Ithaca when others weren't able to do that. We've stepped in and handled gun crime in the city of Ithaca, something we've never had to do before. We secured GIVE funding and really did a good job thwarting the city's increased gun violence that we all saw and experienced. And through this, we all achieved reaccreditation of our corrections division. Our policies are on par, they're transparent, they're public facing. And we somehow, in the last tough few years, we found time to get our law enforcement division accredited for the first time in history. No other law enforcement agency in Tompkins County has this credential. It's just us. A few years ago, if you remember, we lost almost a third of our road patrol capacity. And we worked really hard to build that back up, working with you folks to get that accomplished. And that's something I certainly never want to experience again. At the Sheriff's Office, we do our job. Everything in our budget's based on people. We don't have expensive programs we can scale back on. Everything comes down to salaried lines and positions within the Sheriff's Office that are very crucial to our operation. We operate solely on what we need. There's really no fluff. If we were to cut the positions now in the proposed budget for next year, it would really reverse everything we have going on for us, everything that makes us unique and special in the law enforcement world. We provided the budget with the cuts as asked, and the only things we were able to cut is, like I said, everything that makes us special and unique. In corrections, that means looking at cutting our jail nurse. Obviously, we need to provide medical care to our inmates. If we didn't have that position, we'd be looking at contracting that out. We'd lose a lot of things that come along with that, the personal touch and care of, for the people that need it the most. Our forensic counselor, this would severely impact valuable services to our inmates. This works to teach them improved patterns of behavior, reduce our recidivism that we're so proud of, and aid those most impacted by mental health and drug abuse issues that lead to crime. Our jail is always staffed at minimum requirements set by the Commission of Corrections. To improve our operations, as you know, we created special patrol officer positions. That's what's kind of on the chopping block tonight. That saved us a lot of money, and it gives us a means to provide security when needed and conduct all the inmate transports that we're tasked to do. That request has been increased as well. We're doing more than ever. If you recall, we created those positions by cutting overtime out of our own budget and reutilizing that money to create a lot of those positions. By doing so, that keeps our correction officers in the jail where we need them. It keeps our road patrol on the road where we need them, and it doesn't have them result in being tied up to do that kind of stuff. If we lose positions, overtime is going to go up. Again, we've already cut our overtime to create these positions, so it seems kind of counterproductive to do that and then rely on overtime. I don't want to be in a position where our people are working more and more overtime again to fill in these gaps. That's not fair to them. They've done a tough job for quite a while now. I can tell you my people are tired. It could threaten our ability to provide security at the airport, could cause us to have to pull resources from our care team, utilizing our care deputy to make up work, and also our civilian response unit. I just don't want to get in a position where we're relying on overtime because it's not going to work. It's going to hurt officer wellness, and quite frankly, like I said, we're just going to step backwards, and I don't think that's the sheriff's office any of us want to see happen. We got a lot of good things going on that I'm proud of, and I really want to keep it going. We can bring, sheriff's office first. Megan, if you could change the slide. These are our main lines. Obviously, the biggest cuts proposed would come from our civil line and our law enforcement divisions. Go ahead and change that, Megan. This would require us to cut 2 full-time special patrol officers, our part-time special patrol officer, part-time deputy sheriffs, and we even have our 2 sheriff clerks in there, which was part of reimagination. That'd be a total reduction of 4.8 FTEs, $403,000. Go ahead and change, Megan. These are some of the impacts that I've just mentioned. If we can't maintain our road patrol, we're going to pull from our airport security. It's going to be more difficult for us to staff our security requests that have increasingly increased. Loss of our ability to conduct mandated transports without significant overtime costs. I can add to the fact that having SPOs handling a lot of these transports has really saved us a lot of time and money in how many correction officers we have to provide firearms, bulletproof vests to, training hours to go outside and do these transports. It would create the loss of our entire civilian response unit, which is 2 people right now. It just got off the ground this last year with our 2nd person hired, finally, and likely harm our ability to maintain the care team. Go ahead, Megan. Oh, she's got it. Thank you. The OTR for the reinstatement, I appreciate all the work county admin has put into these budgets. I just don't feel like it's going to be enough to continue doing what we're doing. Cut from our crisis response unit. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say about that. I think we all know what these cuts will do to us, and do you have anything to jump in on, Jen?
No, that is for the second care team, which we're anticipating, well, for the second care team, we're anticipating grant funding from the Office of Mental Health, which is reflected with the zero amount to the cost of the county. The previous slide showed an amount of $132,000, but we are anticipating LEAD grant funding to cover that amount. So we're anticipating that the county would not actually have to come up with that funding, but we haven't heard whether we receive the LEAD grant. My understanding is we'll hear that at the end of September, mid-October is what we're anticipating receiving that grant funding.
To clarify that, the previous OTR was included as a recommended one-time, but what you're saying is if the LEAD funding comes through, that would be applied to offset those?
It would be applied to offset the entire salary and fringe of that deputy for that second care team. And the last OTR, I believe, is the boat. The amount request is $80,000. That is actually half of what the cost of the boat would be, but we are going to be able to receive grant funding from the state. If you do approve the OTR, our boat is over 20 years old. It's got major issues with the hull and engine. It was originally a fishing vessel, so it wasn't even originally meant for a safety and equipment boat. Our county is divided by a lake. It's very important for us to be able to maintain that tool. We are one of the only law enforcement agencies in the county that has a boat to be able to patrol the lake. Parks Police does have a boat, but they are often not able to staff it. There was a Coast Guard auxiliary that would assist, but that's actually going away. So a lot of times we would have to rely on the state police if our boat is not up and functioning. And one of the biggest advantages if we were able to purchase a new boat would be that this boat actually comes with sonar. Right now our boat does not come with sonar. So when there is a drowning victim or we're looking for something at the bottom of the lake, we actually have to wait for the state police to come because they are the only boat vessel that actually has a sonar unit. So I think it's kind of self-explanatory, but we understand it's a big cost, and we wish we were able to find grant funding to fund the whole thing, but this is the position we're in with the boat being so old. I think that's it for the law enforcement, if there's questions specific to that division.
So, like everybody else, you need money.
We
just don't need any taken away from us, that's all.
Yeah, like Jessica from Dewar said, we were able to build most of everything into our maintenance of effort budget, including the sheriff's clerks. The only OTRs we have is to maintain the one care team we have and to expand it to a second care team at the recommendation of whole health and county admin, and then the boat. Obviously, we know that's a big expense, but we recognize it's a tough budget year, and we did our best to build everything into our maintenance of effort budget. And the two care teams, I believe, are going to be fully funded by grant funding. So at this point, the only OTR is to maintain the staff and equipment that we need to keep our operations function.
Shall we open up for questions? Start with Lee.
The care team, with the administrator's recommendation, how many hours would that maintain per week? And how many would the over target or the additional grant add to it?
So the additional grant is for another full-time care team, so it would be another 40 hours a week. We worked with Harmony and their fellow. We pulled data, and call data, and it appears that the peak times that we would need a second care team is actually Monday through Friday, 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. We identified the most call volume for mental health and psychiatric calls. So the thought is that that second care team would work those hours.
And the first one is working?
Right now, they're working 8 to 4. We would probably push that back to 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. So there's a little less overlap and more coverage, because we did actually see a peak around 7 a.m. For calls.
And one other question with the boat, how many years would you, what's the projected lifespan of that?
Based on experience, 20 years. But
Okay. So
yeah, it's hard to say, but yeah, it's probably gone longer than it should have. Yeah.
But you're looking at 80,000 for a new boat with a sonar system.
160.
The grant requires that they pay the full upfront cost of 160, and then they reimburse half the cost. So it would cost 160 upfront, with the understanding that half would be reimbursed from the state.
Thanks.
Randy?
Ash, I was walking down to Marina, and I saw the park police boat, and it needs work. I'm not sure it's been used a lot. You talked about airport coverage, and of course, we're only averaging 4 flights out, and they're sporadic throughout the day. Is there any efficiencies you guys have talked about, so you don't have to be there as often, or?
So we've actually had many conversations, and we've done our best to help the airport financially. Before, we would provide 16 hours a day coverage at the airport, but we recognized that the gate wasn't open 16 hours a day, and the FAA requires that there's a deputy or security there while the gate is open. So we have worked with the airport security our airport to reduce the amount of hours we're there for 8 to 8 hours a day, but it requires odd split shifts. So sometimes we'll be there from 8 to noon, 7 to 11, and then we'll have to go there again from 1 p.m. to 4, depending on their schedule. So we've done our best to work around that and reduce the amount of hours we're there, so that saves them money. But a big savings came from the special patrol officers. When they would reimburse us, most of the time, the security would be provided by deputies working overtime, and that's the rate they'd have to reimburse us. Because we transitioned to special patrol officers, they're now reimbursing us their rate, which is quite a bit lower, and their fringe rate is at the 11% fringe rate versus the 47% fringe rate. So that, you could see through our revenue, I think we reduced the amount of money we're asking the airport to refund us around $150,000 this year. So yes, we have done our best to work with the airport.
I appreciate that. And the other question, Rich regularly lets us know what the jail population is, and I think it's in the last 2 years it's doubled roughly. It was in the 30s for a while, now it's 66.
I would say it was in the 40s, but it certainly has gone up.
Okay.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on that? And do you think that trend's going to continue, or, I mean, just based on, I realize you don't know what's going to happen, but.
I don't see a trend that is going to continue to increase. I mean, our jail numbers were really low a while back because of COVID. I mean, people weren't getting put in jail, so that really impacted the numbers of people we had. Trials weren't occurring for quite a while. I think we've kind of stood where we're at now for quite some time. I don't see any major increase coming our way.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got Veronica, Rich,
Can I just ask a
follow up on
procedural?
that? Sure.
Yeah. Is there another part of your presentation
Yes.
that has to do with the jail?
Yes.
So
Yes.
then we'll have time to ask those questions.
Veronica?
Thanks. A question I only just thought of is, and I'm not sure who this is to, but when for the airport budget, we'd talked about this year the airport not costing any additional taxpayer money. Is that true? I don't know. No?
Not true.
Okay.
It's the debt service.
But other than that, maybe.
Like 642,000 in there.
Yeah, it's essentially half the debt service and half their operational. Half of that OTR, half of it goes toward their debt service and half of it goes toward operational costs.
I guess maybe, thank you. that's not quite on this topic. I guess my question is, but the money for the sheriff, special patrol officer, or deputy, whoever it is at the moment, that's working at the airport, can you explain that money flow? Like,
So we set aside the anticipated revenue, I guess we would receive from the airport reimbursement. We have dropped that down to 8 hours a day. Right now, there's 2 special patrol officers assigned to the airport. They're there, each of them are there about 4 hours a day, and then the other 4, they're doing transports. We've tried to multitask and reduce the amount that we're billing the airport.
so is it the case that in your budget, that staffing is budget neutral, but in the airport's budget, it's an operational cost, the amount of which is dependent on, in this case, reduced by the decisions you all make, or that, I guess, we approve?
Yes, so part of the special patrol officer's salaries are cost neutral because the revenue that we would receive from the airport offsets the expenses we have set aside.
Okay, thank you. A couple other staffing questions. Do you currently have any vacant positions on this road patrol side?
We have 2 open full-time deputy positions that we've been conducting interviews for in the last few.
Okay. And you mentioned this trade-off between overtime and more staff positions. If your staff have to work overtime to make up work, but we haven't budgeted for that overtime, then for whatever reason, where does the money come from during the year?
I imagine we would be coming and asking the county at the end of the year to balance our budget.
And I got to say again, Veronica, I mean, we lowered our budget for overtime over the last several years to create these positions. So to then go back, cut the positions, and then expect to be able to pull from that lower level of overtime backfill.
I assume you don't have this right now, but would it be possible to see a numerical comparison between something that makes sense to you about the costs of overtime versus the salary and fringe costs? Understanding that the scope of work that your office in general has done has expanded some in the years that you've been making those changes.
Are you talking about salary and fringe from a deputy sheriff compared to an SPO, a special patrol officer, or?
I guess more like how much were you spending on overtime at a certain staffing level and how much are you now at a different staffing level?
Yeah, we could come up with something. I can tell you in the last couple of years, I think is the first time ever our jail overtime been within budget. That historically was always over budget. I'm not quite so much with the road patrol, but yeah, we can see what we can come up with.
The hard part about that is a lot of our overtime is actually what we would consider reimbursed. It's offset by revenue we take in, but that's not necessarily reflected in the budget. And I'm talking about grassroots, different contracts we have with schools for sporting events. So all that is going to be reflected as overtime, and you're not going to be able to really differentiate between shift overtime and security requests that we have. Most of that time, that's cost neutral because we're receiving revenue to offset that, but it's not reflected in the budget that way. So it's kind of hard to compare apples to apples with the way the budget is set up, but we can do our best to provide that number to you.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for explaining that. Last question, Lisa's recommended budget suggests $100,000 for the reinstatement OTR for much more than that. Do you know if that was what you got, do you know where you would apply that? Like what positions you would and wouldn't reinstate?
It's hard because we find all of the positions just as important, but we would have to reflect on what our mandated services are, and we are mandated to provide jail transports, and we average 800 to 900 a year. So as hard as the decision would be, I think that we would have to, I think the special patrol officers would allow us to maintain the services that we are mandated to provide.
And the good thing with the SBOs is their schedule being part-time, it's very flexible. Court transports come in, you never know. I mean, we can get a fax that they want one in 10 minutes. We have to be able to.
And SBOs fall outside the deputy sheriff contract or union. We have individual contracts with each one of them, so it's a lot easier as an administrator to manage the work that we get out of them. So.
Let's take Rich's question, and then let's move on to corrections.
Yeah, you showed a slide, I think it was maybe the fourth one or so, with the various positions and the costs, and you had the civilian responders that answer the telephone that Reimagining Public Safety funded. And we hear so much about the care team, and I'm wondering if you could speak to the value you're getting there. And you know, I'm hearing, I recognize what you're saying about the special patrol officers, that this seems like that's pretty vital. In comparison, I guess, could you speak to those positions versus the special patrol officer positions?
I think they're very beneficial, Rich, in the way that they free up deputies from having to go to that call. A lot of the calls they handle, we all know this, they're very minor calls. We get that, but that frees up the time of our road patrol resources for more important and emergent things. Have we seen the impact with it as we have with the care team? Probably not quite as much, to be honest. But I still think it has value. I think the community appreciates it. It gives us a quicker response in a lot of ways. Plus a lot more face-to-face communication when people show up in our lobby. They're there. The impact overall, like I said, with the care team, it's probably not quite as high as the care team. And that's no reflection of the people, obviously, in the positions, but that's just the nature of it.
Yeah, I think it's hard to put a assigned amount of data to their value. I mean, we have the sheriff's clerk hub that you could see, the calls that they're handling, but the things that you don't see are the amount of time they're able to spend. They handle a lot of fraud cases, a lot of people who've been deceived to give a large sum of money, and they're in a crisis, and they have the time. The person usually comes into the office, so they're not, I know it's reflected like they're handling a lot of calls over the phone, but they actually handle just as many walk-ins or people who request to have a face-to-face. So they'll actually come into the office and they'll go into our CAP room when it's free, and they'll sit with the person. And they might spend an hour or two with them, and they talk about different victim services that they could seek for reimbursement, where a deputy sheriff, because of the call volume, might not be able to spend that amount of time. So that's a huge benefit, I believe. And then we've tried to find other ways to use these sheriff's clerks. One of them oversees our sex offender management program and has done a fantastic job. And that is a busy job because
that freed up an investigator and CID to do more important work too. So there's a big payoff there.
They became a chaplain, so they go out on death notifications with our deputies, which has been tremendous. We just filled our second sheriff's clerk position, and we're already starting to think about using that person as evidence custodian to help us manage our evidence, especially with accreditation. That's a huge standard. And we've seen the need to have another set of hands to manage our evidence, so we've thought about using that person to help with that as well. So they're all important. It's just part of making a decision on what our mandated services are.
Yeah, I don't mean to have you try to decide who's your favorite kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Just one note, and the sheriff and undersheriff had, in their maintenance of effort budget, had included those positions under target for 2025, but for the past 3 years, those positions had been over target requests as part of reimagining. Okay, you want to tell us about your jail?
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
I can pull it up. Go to the next slide, Megan. So these are the 3 functional units within the division. We went back and forth whether to include jail transports. I know it says 00, but it is a functional unit within that division because county law under Article 17 does allow for fund for expenses for jail transports for the Board of Supervisors or county ledge to to set aside a fund for those expenses. So I thought it was important to just include that because some counties do function that way where they set aside a certain amount for jail transports and then the sheriff would request refund out of that to conduct the mandated jail transports. Right now, we conduct those out of our own salary and fringe lines from the staff we have. And you could see the difference here is $227,000. You can go to the next slide, Megan. Again, we don't have a lot of places to cut, so we had to cut FTEs or positions. We have to maintain minimum staffing levels within the jails. We could not afford to cut any of our corrections positions. So these are the positions that we identified. There are mandated services, medical and mental health services we have to provide under the commission as well, but there is always the option to contract these services out where there isn't that choice with corrections officers. So that's why we chose these FTEs. We don't recommend doing that. And you can go to the next slide, Megan, for various reasons. One being the increased cost. If you contract services out, there's a huge increase in cost. We did reach out to Tioga County and Steuben just because they contract these services out just to see what the cost would be. It's about triple what it would cost to just maintain those two positions. You're getting less personal service because it's not always the same service provider coming in and out. You're losing that institutional knowledge. I mean, our forensic counselors been there for a long time and has a lot of institutional knowledge that helps the staff in our incarcerated population. And then those staff members are no longer county employees, so you just lose that direct supervision. And then you lose any service beyond the minimum standards that we have to provide. Our jail nurse and forensic counselor go above and beyond to provide services as much as our spacing allows, and we've listed a few of them there. And obviously, an obvious negative would just be the impact on the morale and the well-being of our officers and incarcerated population. Next slide, Megan. And so our only OTR for the jail is just to maintain those two positions. I believe that's it.
Go to questions. Greg?
Thank you. I apologize for walking in at the start of your presentation. So you're saying that if we cut the jail nurse and the forensic counselor, that those services will be required to be outsourced?
Nurse.
The nurse would.
Forensic counselor is not a requirement.
There's some evaluations that need to be done when someone first comes into the facility that's done by a mental health professional. So yes, we would be required to contract those services out if we couldn't provide them any other way.
So I guess my question then would be to Lisa, if it's going to cost us 3 times as much for that nurse position, why recommend cutting it?
I was only able to restore so much and not exceed the tax cap. So that's basically where I landed. It would have to be to the department's recommendation as to where to apply the restoration to, and being that it would cost 3 times as much for the nurse, it would apply to the forensic counselor.
Got it. And that's why the recommendation for about that 100,000 in that line.
More or less. I mean, it was also just, some of this was just purely mathematical in where we were around the tax cap.
Okay. And just to better understand that forensic counselor position works with the incarcerated population on required evaluations, but also additional support services, or what? Like, what's the function?
Programming, counseling. If you remember, before I presented to the Ledge that this is a person that knows every single incarcerated person that comes in and out. She continues to know them outside the jail. She's responded to SWAT call-outs and de-escalated situations. This has been a very beneficial position for us to have. It's not maybe the most common around, but I can't imagine not having her.
And that,
yeah, she provides a lot of the suicide screening. The officers will do that initially, but she'll come up and follow that. If the person's put on additional, she'll evaluate whether they still need to be on constant or additional supervision and make recommendations to the jail administrator on what the next steps would be. She also makes recommendations to our psychiatrist on what her professional opinion would be. And then she, yes, runs groups and individual sessions, yoga, meditation, all sorts of different groups.
And then the last follow-up question would be, how long has this position been in place, the forensic counselor?
It's been there the whole 6 years I've been sheriff, and I think it probably came into just before that, so probably almost 10 years.
Thank you.
Randy?
I'm not sure what impact you have on this, but currently, some people that can't stand trial because of their inability to understand the charges against them, they're put in facilities, state facilities that I think cost us $1.4 million last year. So was this forensic counselor, do you guys counsel before the judge orders somebody into a state-run facility? Sometimes those people are there for a long period of time, up to 3 years. You may not know this or not. And because they're deemed they're not capable of understanding the charges against them. So do you give any feedback to the DA, or do you have a communication with DA? How does this process work where these people are being sent to these facilities? You may not know this, but
I don't.
I believe you're referring to 730 evaluations.
Yes, that's
correct. Which have to be conducted by a psychiatrist. But yes, our forensic counselor does have communication. One of the psychiatrists used to be who we have on contract in our office that has subsequently changed because of various reasons. But yes, our forensic counselor does provide an opinion to them and would provide services up until the point where they're transferred to a medical or a mental health or medical facility. But like you said, sometimes it can take a year for them to even get placed there. So while they're in our facility before they can get placed, yes, that person does receive services.
I'm just noting, did you have a 0.1 person for psychiatry? And I was just curious how that worked, so.
Yeah, they come in about 4 hours a week and have discussions, and they're the only ones who can make recommendations on medication if an incarcerated person needs medication.
Okay, thank you.
Rich?
The forensic counselor, is that Marie?
No, that's Joanne.
Okay.
Yeah.
Marie Boyer's not within our budget.
Yeah.
Is she in whole health? I see, that's why I was confused. Okay. Okay.
Anyone else? Rich? Lee?
Thanks, Mike. Just taking the forensic counselor just a little bit further, the loss of that, would it impact mostly on those that are currently housed there, or would you see a longer-term problem with recidivism? Are they able to work proactively with those that are there and guide them once they're released, or put them on a path that maybe lessens the chance of them coming back again?
Yeah, I mean, obviously she has more contact with the inmates while they're in our facility. But yeah, I mean, she is part of the overall health of the inmate. And part of that soft, we try to conduct to keep people out of it. Yeah, that position being lost would impact.
I mean, most of the groups that she runs concentrates on trying to identify the trauma of why they're there in the first place and help them self-reflect. Like she runs a poetry class and they have poetry contests. So most of the groups she runs concentrates on trying to focus on what kind of trauma caused them to make the decisions that they did to place them there. So yes, I do think it helps them while they're there, but trying to reflect and understand that better would hopefully also help them become productive members of society when they're released.
Jen and I go to a lot of those events, especially at the end when they're getting presented awards and they have little competitions amongst who wrote the best poem or whatever. It's very moving. I can't say enough. I mean, to see the personal side of an inmate when they come and go constantly, to be able to have that interaction with them and see how these things have touched them, made them a better person. It's very impactful.
Veronica.
I'd love to hear from actually people who've been recently incarcerated in our jail, what they think of the importance of, I guess, these two positions and any others. But since they're not here now, my question is, how's the garden going?
Oh, the garden's great. Yeah, URO helped us. You know, that went into decline a little bit during COVID, but they stepped in, helped us. We got correction officers and some inmates out there to get it going again, and a lot of food coming up. It's neat.
Travis.
To your question, Veronica, maybe I could help a little bit. When we were doing the focus groups for the renovations for the jail, folks did talk about the importance of the nurse, especially people that are going through withdrawals and SUDS issues. So that did come up from a few folks, especially when we did the first one at Tally's place.
And keep in mind, we only have one nurse for a 24/7 facility, so she's on vacation, takes time off, and we're working through that. So.
Yeah, they did complain about that.
Yeah,
that they wanted a nurse 24/7 because of some of the issues they were experiencing.
Absolutely.
And had to wait.
Yeah, we would love to have 24-hour coverage, but being respectful of the tough budget you're in, we weren't coming with that OTR, but yes, that would be an ideal situation.
Anyone else? Thank you both. Thank you, Megan, on the Zoom. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Now we're going to whole health. And this is on section 4, page 280 of your budget book.
Lisa? Can I ask Lisa a question? So I'm looking at this schedule, and so the sheriff jail, the 227,000, but over on the right it says target 100,000. Does that mean it's 127,000 short, or is it still 227,000 short?
Sorry, I'm still catching up with you.
Mike, could you say the page number again, please?
Sure. That's page 280 in section 4.
Thank you.
127 short.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Frank, we're
All right.
welcome. And I think you've got folks helping you.
I do. Brenda Grinnell Crosby, our deputy at Public Health, Jeremy Porter, who's our fiscal administrator, and I believe Harmony Ayers Friedlander, who's our deputy mental health commissioner, are all online.
Welcome them all, and we're glad they can join us.
Great. So just jumping right in, it was really impossible to describe everything we do on one or two slides, so I just included our mission statement for you all, and certainly welcome any questions this evening or in any other appropriate setting if folks want to talk more about the vast array of services that we provide. The presentation is going to focus on budget impacts related to the 5% and then the list of OTRs that we have this evening. So the 5% reduction for our department was a little over $300,000. And what that resulted in was the cutting of 2 positions and the adjustment in programming, particularly in our mental health clinic and PROS services to focus more on billable services and less on some of the non-billable, more wraparound type care that we do provide in our clinic. So the 2 positions, one is, they're both community health nurses. They're both currently unfilled. The first one is a community health nurse in our community health services, which is our traditional public health works, the folks that do communicable disease and our maternal and child health work. And the other nurse is in our Children with Special Care Needs program. Those nurses are service coordinators. They are responsible for organizing and coordinating the care of children 0 to 3 that have developmental disabilities and delays. Working backwards, the children with special care needs nurse position, well, both of them have been vacant due to challenges filling nursing positions. So that's kind of the underlying reason for the vacancies over time. The reason these two positions are here is we don't need them today. The Children with Special Care Needs program is still building back from COVID, and we are currently able to manage our caseloads with the staffing levels that we have. The caveat to that is we are trending in a good direction as far as children's numbers and the services we are able to provide. And so therefore, we are likely at some point in 2025 to need some additional care coordination support. Cuts being difficult, as everyone has said, we looked at these positions because they were vacant and we don't need them today. The community health services nurse, the dollar values are different because the children with special care needs is 100% county funded. They are administering a mandated program, and we don't receive any state aid support for those. We do bill for some of their services, so, but for this particular position, it is county supported. The community health services nurse position has been more directly impacted by our inability to recruit. The position is part of our maternal and child health care services. We have been working for several years to try to expand that program beyond just Medicaid mothers and families to anyone that's pregnant in our community. And because of COVID and kind of the ramping up of that and not having staff, we really haven't been able to focus on that. So while we're hoping that we will eventually be in a place to expand that program, we don't have the caseloads today to need the position. So while these are community health nurses, they are the backbone of our department. As we sit here today, particularly as we're talking about cuts, these are two positions that we were able to put forward that we don't need today, but may need in the future. Our FTE count has shifted a bit. I think you all were made aware through Lisa's presentation that our public health fellow program that was fully funded by the state was scheduled to be 2 years, and those 2 years came and went. The state still had money left, so we're in 2.0. For lack of a better way of describing it, but there was not enough funding to continue it at the same levels there were. So our complement of fellows went down from 9 to 4. So 5 of that 5.5 are those positions that were eliminated, and the 0.5 was a coordinator position that we don't need, having only 4 fellows. That has no impact on the county budget because it was 100% funded by the state, but it does impact the FTE count. I talked about the decrease in community health nurse. It is 1.8 FTE because I'm sorry, I misspoke. Part of the reason the community health nurse, the community health services nurse was less is we had a retirement actually a couple of weeks ago of someone that had been working in the title at 0.8. And so we are actually eliminating that 0.8 and recruiting the vacant full-time one that we had to replace her because we do have that need. So it is 1.8 FTE that would be reduced in the community health nurse line. Sorry about that. The increased licensed clinical therapists for the care team, the sheriff and undersheriff, we're talking about the expansion. For us, it's to a 3rd team. With the sheriff, it would be a 2nd team. There is state funding through OMH. We've already brought that through the legislative process for approval. So it is an added FTE, but it is no impact on the county portion of our budget. The increased senior psychiatric social worker, a portion of that is part of the growth of the care teams. If we're going to have more clinical therapists in the field, we needed to build appropriate supervision outside of our clinic. And so what we did is we created a senior position that is partially funded by those state funds and will partially be funded by revenue from the clinic. So that person is going to be overseeing the totality of our forensics and outreach services and mobile crisis services. So they will be overseeing the care therapists as well as working with our domestic violence and sexual violence programs within the clinic. Again, one FTE, but no direct impact on the county share. The other two are more things that we do. The psychiatrist line, we go back and forth between contracting and employing. And so that's really just almost just a budget mechanic of that 1 point FTE. It's really not a change in what we're doing. It's a difference between formerly contracting for, but now employing a part-time psychiatrist in the clinic. And the decrease in peer support, we are now a couple of years into our peer program. We have 2 folks that are stable in that position that have their hours established, and the program director does not see the need to fill the other 0.4 FTE. So that is the reduction in the peer line. So jumping into our OTRs, and there's quite a few. I feel a little bad in all of this, but many of them are previously funded or one-time attempts here. So the care team, this is the continuation of the 2 care teams, our portion of it. So essentially what's included in this are the salaries and fringe. We have very little, if any, operational budget. If we need equipment and things, generally that comes from the sheriff's side because they do have lines for that. So this would be year 3 of a continuation of the care teams, and it was included by the county administrator. Early intervention, this was a program that the legislature approved. Initially, it was to hire 4.5 positions. We were struggling to recruit them. We made a pivot. We have now hired a speech-language pathologist, thankfully, and that has started to bring the wait list down for speech therapy. And the other portion of the money we with your approval, have created a stipend for services, and that's what this OTR is continuing. The contracts are in place for some therapists, others are still reviewing. No one has been paid yet, but we are very close to those first checks going out, and early indications are that 1, we've seen a decrease in the wait list because we hired a speech-language pathologist, and 2, we're hearing from some of the providers that with the stipend, they would be able to take on more children in our early intervention program. So we are still cautiously optimistic, but so far the early indications are that it will be helpful. And this is a continuation of multi-year one-time OTR, and it was recommended by the county administrator. Mobile support services, this was an OTR that we brought forward last year after having secured 1-year funding for a pilot program to have an outreach worker program in the rural parts of the county. If you'll remember, there was a conversation. It was my hope and interest that we would be able to bring that together with a community outreach worker program that was jointly funded by the Downtown Ithaca Alliance, the City of Ithaca, as well as the county. We went through an RFP process with those 3 entities. We were not successful in finding a vendor that could do it. I think we are in a place of there's the clarity of or aligning a vision about how best to use the totality of those dollars still hasn't been, we haven't been successful in aligning that yet with the 2 other partners. And because it hasn't been contracted, it was a place where it's not a program that's currently operational. And so it was not recommended by the county administrator. Suicide Prevention Coalition support, this is a brand new OTR. This came to us from a community partner, the Suicide Prevention Coalition, which is a group of community partners, through our mental health subcommittee and supported by our community services board. Essentially, the Suicide Prevention Coalition is struggling to take the strides forward that they are all hoping we could, and it is in large part, as you probably know, it's often difficult to move those things forward without paid staff that are dedicated to that work. So this OTR was a new request to support some hours from a community partner to be able to support that coalition. It is a brand new OTR and not supported in the county administrator's budget. Our environmental health permit management software, there are 2 OTRs for this. One is continuing funding and the other is one-time funding. The reason that we're faced with this is we were in the unfortunate situation of being on the cusp of when ITS was recommending that all of our applications be hosted internally, and when the recommendation was to move everything to the cloud. So this current software is hosted locally. The vendor, after next year, is no longer going to support locally hosted operations. So we are in a position that we have to make a change either to their cloud-based system, which is what these OTRs are based on, and or switching to a different vendor. We are actively looking at different vendors in hope of trying to find a more cost-effective approach, but this is what we think would be the max impact based on continuing with the current vendor in a new form. So this is one of those things that I think many departments are faced with, is trying to continue to keep up with our software needs in a changing environment. And both of these OTRs are supported by the county administrator. The second one is the one time for the transition. The next 2 are the restoration of the community health nurse positions. They are in here because they were cuts to our budget, and this was the mechanism to make sure you were aware of those cuts. We don't need either of them today. So I can't say that we might not be back talking to you at some point next year if things change, but from a decision-making perspective, we don't need them today. They're both here. And the last OTR is the vehicle lease. I'll give my real short thing and hand it over to Lisa. This is our portion of the county's vehicle procurement process. We are able to leverage state aid if it is in our budget. And so this is the mechanism we use each year for it to be in our budget. Beyond that, Lisa would have to explain further.
Yeah, so the whole health is the exception in most of the other departments' vehicle needs are covered under the Green Fleet program and leasing, but for whole health, in order to be reimbursed the state aid, it has to show up in whole health's budget. So unfortunately, it shows up as an OTR in their budget, but it is a mechanism for us to receive that state funding.
And that is all that I have. Happy to take questions.
Very thorough, thank you. Questions? Go ahead, Rich.
The Suicide Prevention Coalition support, do you have an opinion on how effective that might be, or?
Yeah, so part of the challenge is we've had a volunteer that's been doing that has been very effective, but she has retired from her work and is no longer able or willing to serve, and things have floundered in the absence. And we've tried to fill the gaps with other volunteers, including from our department, but it really was the interest of that coalition as well as the Community Services Board that there be direct funded support to kind of manage it moving forward.
And how would this work with suicide prevention and crisis, the 988?
Yeah, so they are the lead entity in this, and so our hope would be is that they would be the one we contracted with to provide this staff time to the Suicide Coalition.
Thank you.
Other questions? Lee?
Maybe it's a question for Lisa. Does suicide prevention see other funding through the county government, Human Services Coalition, or anywhere else? Is there a contribution coming in through one of the departments?
If not, I would have to go back and look through. It may be through the Human Services Coalition. The only other likely department would be Whole Health.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to look it up, but my computer is.
I think they actually receive a pass-through that comes from the state and goes through the county.
They do get money passed through for us. I am unsure. I don't believe they get any direct county funding, but I could be wrong. Let me check that.
And I don't think it's a lot. I want to say it's under 30,000.
There was
I think there might be some support for 211.
Yes.
There was a community recovery grant, but it was a one-time thing.
It looks like it's about 34,000 that the county currently supports.
Okay, so there is some funding going toward them at this point.
And for the longest time, Tompkins County was the only county supporting them when they were doing the whole 607 region. The Suicide Coalition was on the verge of, Suicide Prevention and Crisis Services had a organizational challenge for a while that has been rectified through new leadership. They are now a model in the state, and they have expanded their catchment area as well for the 988 coverage that Rich was just asking about. So they are in a much different place than they were even just a few years ago, and being able to do that work for our community and our region.
Yeah.
Lisa?
I'm just seeing in our contract list, suicide prevention for $219,000. Is that what you just pointed to, Frank?
Yeah, so
Okay.
the total is 219, and it looks like 184,000 of that is state pass-through, 185,000.
Is there a trend on suicides?
Yes. It's not going in the right direction. They're not huge numbers similar to our overdose death numbers. They're not giant, but they are not going in the right direction, and one is too many, right, in all of this. And I think the hope with the coalition is it's bringing together many, many different organizations around a zero suicide model, which is really building into the healthcare system where anytime somebody is touched, that we can try to identify that they might be at risk and get them the help that they need.
Randy?
Yes, going back to on your presentation, I think it was OTR 6, I can't remember, but on health permits, software for health permits. So is that for like people applying for, so you can monitor permits at like hotels or food establishments or somebody getting a well, those kinds of things?
Yeah, it's our environmental health system, so all of the regulated permits and that type of work is all done electronically now.
Do we charge fees for most of those things?
We do.
Okay. And when's the last time those fees have been adjusted, or do you have the right to adjust them?
Yes, those fees are looked at and reviewed every year by the Board of Health. Most of them do not cover a large portion of the cost. And part of the reason for that is we have to balance the cost of the permit versus people considering going underground and not getting the permit because it would be less expensive to chance getting caught not having a permit. So we review those fees every year. We make adjustments to them. There are traditional percentages that we have looked program by program that we try to achieve, and we adjust the permits, based on that as our costs go up.
Thank you.
And the Board of Health reviews that every summer. They've done that for this summer, so we could share what changes happened. They were minimal this year, but there were small changes that occurred.
Thank you. I'd like to see that.
Sure.
Big department, folks. Other questions? Veronica.
That mobile support services OTR that's not recommended, doesn't have a vendor, did we fund that last year?
2023?
Like, I guess did we fund that in the 2024 budget?
Yes.
With the hope that we would find a provider, but we didn't?
Correct.
Yeah. So does that mean that money is not going to get spent?
Yes. Well,
or hasn't been?
I don't know if the county has a different plan for it.
No, as of yet for 2024, it's the money is unspent. This was the funding that, well, in previous years, the program was run through Family and Children's Services until they stopped providing it. So in 2024, we had one unsuccessful RFP for it.
Okay. And my other question is maybe also more for Lisa, or someone over here. In the budget book, at the top of the whole health page, I'm looking at the wrong thing now, but the top of every page had an amount of dollars that was the local share, and then an amount that was under net local share, it's got a fiscal target, and then the 5% fiscal target, meaning like 5% less. In this case, above that, there's a line that says mandate, like $2.9 million. The way I'm understanding that is that the 2.9 and change million are also local dollars that we are spending, but you didn't include that in the target amount of which 5% is computed to be cut?
That's correct.
Because it is directly mandated by the state?
Yes, not subject to the 5% cut, the mandates.
So does that mean you have to add the 2.9 to the 5,845,000 to get the local share?
Yes.
Yes. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if you look in the consolidated budget request down at the bottom on the row called calculation, that is the amount of local dollars going toward the thing, right? Or the department.
So they did the math for us?
Yeah, but I like checking because then I can understand. Thanks.
Frank, we know about the loss of the Alcohol and Drug Council. Have they vacated the mental health building, and what can you tell us about efforts to replace them?
They have vacated the mental health building in human form. Much of their stuff is still there, so we're navigating through that. But from a moving forward perspective, we did issue 3 RFPs for the 3 services that they provided: the detox stabilization at Trip Hammer, outpatient services, and prevention services, the biggest being the detox stabilization. Today, HHS approved Cuyahoga Health Systems as the vendor, so that will be coming to you all at your next meeting. So CHS will get $600,000 of annual operating costs, as well as the use of the facility on Trip Hammer Road to stand up detox. We've also gotten approval from OMH and OASIS, the Office of Mental Health, and the Office of, they changed the acronym, it's Substance Use Abuse Services, for CHS to apply for an intensive crisis stabilization license, which will allow them to do both mental health and substance use under the same license. The next step in the puzzle that we're efforting right now is to get OASIS and DOH, who paid for the Trip Hammer building, to allow them to put that license into the Trip Hammer building, which would then create a single location where mental health and substance use, crisis and detox and stabilization would all be co-located under the CHS umbrella to provide those services. We're hoping to have that answer from OASIS by the end of the month, so that CHS will be able to present the plan for the $1.5 million that you all have allocated to retrofit the space to include that intensive crisis stabilization licensed activities.
Sounds to me like all pretty good news.
Yes, and ultimately, it was tragic what happened with the ADC, and we never want to go through that again, but we may actually end up in a better place having it all collated together under a singular license that makes it more efficient, effective for both the people seeking service and our community partners that support those people.
Shauna, did you have a hand?
No, I put it down. Thank you.
Okay. Rich?
Because of these pending things, this sounds like great news. Will there be budget impacts? You're going to be coming back to us with changes?
No, the good news is we're spending state money on all of this, except for the 1.5 million, of course, that you guys have already allocated. So there should be no county impact. I can't promise that somebody might not come ask you guys for money at some point, but right now the plan is that CHS would operate that facility with the $600,000 and without state funding for the intensive crisis stabilization. Everyone else that RFP'd for that around the state and was successful got state aid associated with that, but CHS has put together a proposal where they think they can make it cost effective without that state aid. But there should be no county ask for additional funding for this moving.
Other questions? Lisa?
Just a couple of comments. Going back to Veronica's question or comment about the local share and the mandate costs versus the other costs, I wanted to point out and to thank Frank and Jeremy and his team for their estimations around the mandate costs for 2025 and realizing the type budget year that we're having this year. They really worked with us to try to paint a realistic picture of what those mandate expenses are going to be so that we're not over budgeting and we're not at the same time shorting ourselves where we're going to incur expenses. Given what we've seen with the shortage of providers around some of the early intervention programs, we are lower there than what we know what the need really is, but we're not likely to incur as many expenses because of the provider shortage. And then at the same time, the costs of the 730 competency, the issues around competency, which we know we are seeing increases in, we are taking steps again to phase those in over a 3-year, those expenses in over a 3-year period. So just wanted to call those items out in the whole health mandates. And I wanted to make one other mention of my recommendation of the opportunity to look at that $250,000 that are currently budgeted for the outreach program that we currently do not have a provider for. A portion of those funds go to fund rural outreach, and a portion are for the community outreach worker program that we have funded for some time in conjunction with the Downtown Ithaca Alliance and the city. Been in contact with those two partners about this budget and this recommendation. And there are still certainly needs that they are seeing in the city. And so we may be hearing more from certainly the DIA about this impact, and maybe a little bit more to come on that and what the needs are and how even a portion of those funds may be looked to be reallocated to meet some of those needs.
Okay, anyone else? Frank, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And we appreciate having Jeremy and Brenda and Harmony out there for us too. Brings us to our legislature, our clerk, Katrina. And this is on in section 4, page 176. Katrina, what, are you going to do it from there? How are you going to? Sure. She's going to stay where she is, and I guess she's going to juggle everything. I guess she's going to make her presentation, take minutes, and make coffee, whatever.
Nope, not going to do coffee.
When you're ready, Katrina. And by the way, we're about 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Good job for the chair.
Some people are nuts. Taylor made coffee today. Taylor made coffee before she left.
Just want to clarify, it's not the clerk's job to make coffee.
Did it
We
on
were
her break.
grumbling about that over here. 176, 176.
Ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
All right, let's go.
Here's our lovely legislature, our class of 2024.
Who?
Picture we had the other day.
Except for I'm making a weird face. Just an overview of what we do in the office. We provide the administrative support to all 14 of you, and soon will be 16. Annually, we coordinate and facilitate over 150 meetings, and we do approximately 10 public hearings a year, some more, some years, some less, but that's the average. We process about 300 resolutions annually, 5 local laws, and we make over 100 appointments to advisory boards. We maintain the official records and actions of the legislature, and we provide information as requested by the members of the public, and we ensure that all necessary statutory and regulatory requirements are fulfilled while adhering to open meetings law. The 5% cut that we were required to do was approximately $50,000. And our budget is $997,000, of which 90% of that is salary and fringes. So I had a very small slice of the pie to make a 5% cut from. If we have a reduction in staff hours, it'll be challenging. The impact, the challenge will be an impact on the current level of service to legislators, to departments, and to members of the public. It will impact our software rollout, and it could impact the statutory responsibilities that this office has. There would be a loss of travel and training funding in the clerk's budget, and currently only myself travel to the clerk's conference annually, and I bring back as much information as I can to share with my team. There was also a cut made to legislators' travel and training, and that would impact your attendance to annual conferences across the state, including NISAC, and there's a few other ones that we do have legislators travel to on a regular basis. There was also a cut made to the local mileage and reimbursement, and this will impact legislators' attendance at various events related to their duties as legislators. And I reduced the membership dues for NACO in the budget as part of that cut, and the effects will be the benefits that we receive from those memberships in trainings, conferences, and other opportunities. The first priority OTR was to reinstate a position that was cut. We reduced hours by approximately 3 hours a week to 1 position. And there was also a reduction in the travel and training for the clerk's office, and Lisa did recommend them in her budget. The second priority was to reinstate the cut to travel and training and to the local mileage. And the cut was $28,000 for travel and training, and I do believe it was $11,000 to the local mileage reimbursement. And I did only ask to reinstate $19,000 of that. and that was not recommended. And the reduction to the NACO membership was $2,115, and that was not reinstated. Yes.
Couple of questions. So that $2,115, is that all of the NACO? Okay.
That's our annual dues. It went up this year by only $84. It's based on the
Right.
population of the county.
Okay. And then I'm not sure, personally, I'm not sure how much of a benefit NACO's actually been to us as compared to NISAC, so this doesn't give me heartburn. The other question I have is, since we've finally figured out what our policy is about local mileage, how much local mileage do we actually need? I mean, I don't know if this is a question you can answer or if it's a question for us.
Amanda was next, unless Dan wants to respond directly to that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead.
The change to the policy is that it's taxable. There's no reason at this moment to think that it's going to change the number of miles submitted.
Okay.
In my mind, at least.
Well, just a question. I feel like some of the OTRs didn't make it onto this sheet. I only see one for the legislature clerk on page 2.
The other two are on the first page, the top 2 lines.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Randy?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the department request and consolidated budget. So the 2024 budget was $1,047,469. So what's been recommended by administration, is that 979,692? Is that, am I reading that right?
I believe so, Liz.
What are you looking at, Randy?
So I'm looking at the department request consolidated budget expenditures and revenues.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm just looking at the total budget of $1 million for this year. And so I'm trying to understand what was recommended for this year. I see the over target request.
Oh, 958.
For 2024, we did a software, we purchased software, and I think that's the difference. That's why last year, or well, this year is higher than next year.
Okay.
But the total recommended amount was the 979.
Okay, great. That answers my question. Thank you.
Go ahead and clarify.
The department requested the 979,692. The table below for the consolidated budgets, the county administrators recommended is 958,577.
Great, thank you. I found that screen.
Other questions? Shauna?
Thank you. So I happen to think not having a NACO membership for a year, I don't think is a great loss. I'm not sure that we utilize it fully. And I think Greg and I have been the only ones that have gone to the meeting in Washington, D.C. As far as the other training, I mean, I'm a little bit concerned about that because, you know, as most people know, we don't make much as legislators. And, you know, I personally actually get a lot out of NISAC. And every time we go, I think we bring back information to our peers and our colleagues. I always bring stuff back to our department heads. And from what I see, it seems to be a really good investment because there have been grants that we've applied for, new ideas, things that we brought back to our county that have saved us a lot of money, but have also made our county better. So, you know, I just want to put a little bit of a plug in for NISAC and the great skills that they provide us with and the great innovative ideas they provide us with as well to help our county.
Ann?
So travel training is about half for legislators, and let's see, for clerks.
The travel and training for the clerk was 750.
It was only 750 for all the clerks per year?
It was just for, yes, that would be for all of us. There's just one conference that I've attended this year, and that's all that we would plan on one person attending next year.
And what is the, maybe I'm not seeing it here, what is the budget generally, like say last year?
1,000 last year.
This year was 1,000.
Okay. And do you know how much, going back to the legislature, or going to the legislature, local mileage, what, do you have any figures for what is generally applied for or submitted?
This year we budgeted 11,000, and to date we have about 2,500 has been utilized. It's usually between 4,000 and 5,000.
So it would maybe come on a first come, first served basis then after that, after the money was gone? If you didn't submit, you wouldn't get it?
Likely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead, Veronica.
Can you remind me, do other county staff, elected or otherwise, get local mileage reimbursement for anything? And if so, where does that appear in the budget? I know there are ways in which our positions are fundamentally different, and also I live very close to here, so I'm not so intimately familiar with the reimbursement because I don't need it, but I understand it's important.
Go ahead, Lisa.
So, yes, the answer to that is yes. County staff can claim local mileage to and from work-related activities from their office. And, you know, it depends. There are also fleet vehicles that departments utilize so that they don't have to claim local mileage.
Greg?
The difference is in the legislature budget, and our rules of the legislature allow legislators to submit miles from home to chambers, where regular, I don't want to say regular, where county employees outside of the legislature would not be able to submit for mileage to and from their workplace. That's the difference in local mileage.
Amanda?
Back to the travel and training. So I feel like sometimes their Department of HR, they'll say, we have money and somebody can, you know, tag onto that. Is that something that the clerks could use or we could utilize more, or where does that come from?
Yes, we utilized funds from HR last year when the clerks conference was in Cortland.
Right, okay.
And that was, we've traditionally, since I've been here, there hasn't been a travel and training line in the clerk's budget. This was the first year that we put that in, and we're trying that out, so.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
I also just wanted to speak to that too, because that was the thought that HR has had a training line in its budget that is available widely across the organization, because some departments do not have training lines, others do. However, for the 2025 budget, that is where HR sustained a large portion of its 5% cut. So while they will still have a budget for travel and training across the organization, it may be more of a first come, first serve for 2025.
Katrina?
I just wanted to follow up on the NACO dues. Those are NACO dues for the county, and they are utilized countywide, just like our NISAC dues are for the county, and they are utilized by most departments. And I didn't even attempt to make any cut on our NISAC dues, because I think that would have been detrimental.
I could just say that the county went many, many years without being a member of NACO. It's only more recently that we've been a member. Veronica?
Can we put this quick ask out to the rest of the county staff of what do you get out of NACO?
I can send an email out in the morning to department heads.
Okay, anything else? Yes, Frank, sure. Come to a microphone.
Staff's texting me. I should know better than let me go by myself. Just to answer Lee's question about the suicide prevention crisis services, the portion that's not a state pass-through is money that we pay them to cover our after-hours crisis for our clinic. So both our mental health clinic and our PROS clinic licensure requires us to have 24/7 access, and we use them as the call center to provide that service. So it is something that we pay them. They provide a service for our clinic that we have to have. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thanks for that. Anything else, Katrina?
No, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation tonight. Okay, now, I'm going to ask to go into executive session in accordance with the New York State Public Officers Law. We want to take an executive session to discuss the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation. And does someone want to move that we go into executive session? Deborah Dawson, seconded by Mike Sigler. Guess we have to roll call, don't we? We'll do a roll call.
Mike Sigler.
Yes.
Travis Brooks.
Yes.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
Amanda Champion.
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Dan Klein.
Yes.
Rich John.
Yes.
Veronica Pillar.
Yes.
Ann Corman.
Yes.
Z.
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Susan Curry.
Yes.
Lane.
Yes.
14 ayes.
Okay, and I don't expect taking any action when we come back out. Dan, anything else before we go in? Okay. All right, why don't we shut down? Let's take a break until 7:15 while they shut down. Who else do you want here?